Oh, what is going on, everybody, and welcome back to my YouTube channel. It's your boy Jay, bringing us another 2023 NFL tier ranking video. And in today's tier ranking video, we are going to be tier ranking all 32 NFL wide receiver cores, with the draft being over, with free agency being pretty much wrapped up, and we are now heading into the off-season workouts. I figured we have a rough idea of what the receiving cores are going to look like heading into the 2023 NFL season. So I figured what better time to do a 2023 tier ranking video on all the receiving cores. I think what I'm going to start doing is a tier ranking series where I tier rank all the different position groups for the NFL teams. I'm just going to start with the receivers. I actually saw another YouTuber do this, so I forgot his name. Let me look. It is Ultimate Scouting. Shout out to him. I saw him do this video first a couple days ago, so shout out to him for the idea credit. But yeah, I saw it and I was like, oh, that's a good idea. So I could do the receivers and then we'll do quarterbacks and all that stuff. So yeah, starting off with the receivers. I hope you guys enjoy it. If you guys do, make sure to like and subscribe so you don't miss out on any future content, because I'm going to be getting a lot of content out on the 2023 NFL season. But without further ado, let's just get to the video. So starting off at first place, we have the elite position, and I'm actually going to go from elite and work my way down to good luck to your quarterback. I'm going to start from with the best receivers and work my way down to the worst. Starting off, though, with elite, I have at first place the Cincinnati Bengals. I don't think there's much debating here. I think it's pretty well known the Cincinnati Bengals do have the best receiving core in the league. Jamar Chase, T. Higgins, Tyler Boyd. When your wide receiver 3 could be a wide receiver 1 on some teams, that's when you know you have one of the best, if not the best, wide receiver core in the league. They also added Andre Iosavis and Charlie Jones in the draft to get some more depth there. Trent Irwin as well. Not even a lot to talk about there with the Bengals receiving core. And one thing I do want to mention, though, when I say receiving core, I'm just talking about wide receivers. I'm not including tight ends or like receiving backs, just wide receivers for the receiving core. So this video is without tight ends. So I think the Bengals, it's pretty obvious they have the best wide receiver core in the league. Another team, though, that I think has jumped up to elite is the Los Angeles Chargers. This wide receiver core was very hurt last year. Jalen Guyton was hurt, Keenan Allen, and Mike Williams. Now, Jalen Guyton, Mike Williams, and Keenan Allen all coming back with the addition of Quentin Johnson. They also added Darius Davis in the draft from TCU, who is very fast. Joshua Palmer, who was he really stepped into that wide receiver 1 role once Mike Williams and Keenan Allen were hurt last year. Jalen Guyton, he stepped into that wide receiver 1 role and filled it pretty well. So I think now with Mike Williams, Quentin Johnson, Keenan Allen, Jalen Guyton, Joshua Palmer, I do think they have I think they have the second best wide receiver core in the league, and I think they could even make a push to have the best wide receiver core in the league if they can all come back fully healthy and ready to play and compete. I do think the Chargers have a very good wide receiver core, and I'm very excited to watch them with Justin Herbert in this upcoming year. Moving on to number 3, I have the Miami Dolphins. As a Patriots fan, it kills me to say this, but I have to give respect to the Dolphins, and really the main reason they are on here is just because Jalen Waddle and Tyreek Hill, 2 top 10 receivers. You can make the case Tyreek Hill is one of the best, if not the best in the league. Jalen Waddle, I think he's a top 10 receiver, definitely a top 15 receiver, and the sheer speed between those two, it's just unstoppable. And I think if Tua Tagovailoa can stay healthy this upcoming year, I think they're going to dominate. They're going to run all over the secondaries they face. They also have Robbie Anderson and Braxton Berrios as some good wide receiver depth, so they have good depth as well. And like I said, I mean, just Jalen Waddle and Tyreek Hill alone is enough, I think, to put them in elite, and so they are. I think it is the best wide receiver duo in the league. And I think, again, they are going to dominate this upcoming season. Moving on to my final elite team, and I was debating whether or not I should put them as like the best amazing team or just put them in elite. I have to put them in elite. I can't put them in amazing. The Philadelphia Eagles, similar to what I said with the Dolphins, Tyreek Hill and Jalen Waddle, A.J. Brown and Devontae Smith are such a good wide receiver duo. I can't not put them in amazing. They also added Olamide Zaccheaus as a wide receiver 3 in the slot, who Olamide Zaccheaus came from the Falcons. I actually think he's pretty good, and I think now that he is a very solid quarterback, I think he is definitely going to improve. I think he could show some good flashes this upcoming year. You also have Quez Watkins as a good wide receiver 4-ish in the slot as well, so pretty good depth there. Like I said, Olamide Zaccheaus, who not a lot of people were talking about that signing. I think he could serve as a nice wide receiver 3. And like I said, A.J. Brown, Devontae Smith, they're enough to put this wide receiver core in elite. And I think they are going to only improve in the next coming years. Moving on to the amazing tier, and the first team I'm putting in the amazing tier is the Dallas Cowboys. Adding Brandon Cooks to that roster this offseason was a major move, and I think that is going to greatly improve that receiving trio. It looks like it's going to be CeeDee Lamb, Brandon Cooks, and then Michael Gallup. Brandon Cooks, Dak Prescott's going to be the best quarterback he's played with in a while. Michael Gallup, 2 years off of his ACL injury, and I actually think Michael Gallup, when he can stay healthy, is a very good receiver, and I think he's going to be a good wide receiver 3 this year, as long as he, like I said, can stay healthy. Not a guy people talk about a lot, but like I said, I do think he can be a good, serviceable wide receiver 3 if he can stay healthy. Brandon Cooks, like I said, getting the best quarterback he's had in a while, and I do think he is going to thrive. CeeDee Lamb, he's a beast. He's going to continue to be dominant, and I do think it is a good wide receiver trio. Not a lot of depth there at the receiving position. You do have Jalen Tolbert and KaVontae Turpin, who kind of are like your wide receiver 4 and 5s. So not great depth, but I do think that wide receiver trio is enough to put it in amazing. Moving on to the next amazing team, I have the Minnesota Vikings. I think that wide receiver trio now is going to be dominant. You have Justin Jefferson, Jordan Addison, and then KJ Osborne. I actually like KJ Osborne. I think he's been good. He's shown flashes. He can be a good deep threat, and I think him as a wide receiver 3, I think he could be a serviceable option for Kirk Cousins. The main guy, though, obviously was Jordan Addison, who they picked up in the first round of the draft. He is going to be a great wide receiver 2 to complement Justin Jefferson. Finally, he's not going to be able to be double teamed every single game. Justin Jefferson, a beast. He's going to have another great season, I think. And then Jordan Addison, I do think that is going to really diversify that offense and that receiving core. And then, like I said, KJ Osborne as your wide receiver 3. I think that is a very good wide receiver trio, and I think it can even make a push to be better than Dallas's. You can debate about that in the comments if you want. Jalen Nailor and then Jalen Reagor as your kind of depth guys there. Brandon Powell also from the Rams. Not bad depth. Everybody knows how people feel about Jalen Reagor, but not bad depth at the wide receiver position. But like I said, that wide receiver trio is just so good. Similar to with the Cowboys, it earns a spot in amazing. Moving on to the next amazing wide receiver core, I have the Las Vegas Raiders. With the addition of Jakobi Meyers this offseason, I think that is enough to put them in the amazing category. Davante Adams, Jakobi Meyers, and then Hunter Renfrow, who is looking like he will be healthy week 1 for his injury, or coming off of his injury, who he suffered in week 9 versus the Jags. I think that is a good wide receiver trio. Now, there has been talk that Hunter Renfrow could potentially be traded away. If he does, that will definitely kind of hurt them a little bit. He's their main slot receiver. I think that would knock him down to really good. But Davante Adams, one of the best, if not the best receivers in the league. I think that's enough to put them in amazing. And then Jakobi Meyers, I think, is going to be a serviceable wide receiver too. I think he gets a little too much flack. In New England, he was the wide receiver 1 on a horrible offense with a horrible offensive coordinator. I think now he, as the wide receiver 2 behind Davante Adams on a good offense, I think he'll be able to flourish, and I think he will definitely have a major improvement year from last year on the Patriots. Sad to see him go. I liked him as the Patriots. I'm a Patriots fan now. Sad to see him go, but I do think he's going to do much better in Las Vegas, and he already threw the touchdown last year against the Raiders, so yeah, that was funny. But anyways, Hunter Renfrow at wide receiver 3. I'm not sure if he's going to be traded or not. If he does, like I said, that would hurt him a little bit. But I do think if he can come back, doesn't get traded, stays healthy, I do think he will be a good serviceable wide receiver 3. And I do think that will actually be a pretty good wide receiver trio for Jimmy Garoppolo. Moving on to my final amazing team, I have the Jacksonville Jaguars. I think a lot of people are forgetting Calvin Ridley's on that team. The Jags were a very good wide receiver core last year without Calvin Ridley. Now imagine how good they're going to be with Calvin Ridley, and he's looking great at OTAs right now, looking like he is where he left off. And so Calvin Ridley, Zay Jones, and then Christian Kirk, that's going to be a very good wide receiver trio. I think, Christian Kirk, a lot of people called it an overpay last offseason when they paid him all that money, like $72 million. But he showed up this season. He showed that he is worth it. And then Zay Jones as well. He had a good, big year. Calvin Ridley going to be the wide receiver 1. I think that is going to be a major improvement to that wide receiver trio. You also have Jamal Agnew in there as well, who's kind of a versatile guy who you can move around. They also had Parker Washington in the draft. So I think it's good. They have good depth. They have a very good wide receiver trio, which I think is the most important thing, is just to have a good wide receiver trio. And they do in Calvin Ridley, Zay Jones, and Christian Kirk. And if Christian Kirk and Zay Jones play as good as they did last year, I think it could be one of the best wide receiver cores in the league this upcoming year. I am putting them, I think next year they have a very good shot to be in elite. I just am putting them in amazing mainly to see how good Calvin Ridley is. If he comes back and plays how he's been practicing so far and what the expectations are, then I think they're definitely going to be in elite. I'm just putting them in amazing just to hold off a little bit because we haven't seen Calvin Ridley play in over a year. But I don't have any worries. I think they are going to be an elite wide receiver core, and I think next year at this time we will be putting them in the elite category. Moving on to the really good category, the first team I have is the New York Jets. I think this is going to be one of the best wide receiver cores, and not one of the best, but one of the most improved wide receiver cores in the league last year. Garrett Wilson, who obviously was amazing last year, Offensive Rookie of the Year. Allen Lazard coming over with Aaron Rodgers from Green Bay. Mecole Hardman coming from Kansas City. Corey Davis, Denzel Mims, and Randall Cobb, who's also a veteran receiver coming over from Green Bay. I think Garrett Wilson has a chance to have a triple what he had last year, I think he could triple it this year. You look at how dominant Garrett Wilson was in his rookie season with Mike White and Zach Wilson throwing him the football. Imagine how good he's going to be now with Aaron Rodgers throwing him the football. I think it's going to be one of the biggest wide receiver jumps we've ever seen in history. And he had a great wide receiver year last year, offensive rookie of the year. I think it's going to be 10 times better than it is this year. I'm very excited to see Garrett Wilson. Allen Lazard, I think he's also going to have a big year as wide receiver 2 behind Garrett Wilson. Mecole Hardman, a good deep threat as wide receiver 3 coming over from Kansas City. And then they have a good depth chart as well. Corey Davis, he's great. Denzel Mims and Randall Cobb, like I said, a veteran slot receiver coming over from Green Bay as well with Aaron Rodgers. I think this is a good, really good wide receiver core, and I do think if they develop and they kind of connect, I think they could be a very elite receiving core now that Aaron Rodgers is there. And I'm very excited. Like I said, the one thing is a lot of new guys coming in there, Allen Lazard, Mecole Hardman, and Randall Cobb. But I do think if they can connect and kind of develop together very quickly, I think it is going to be a very elite receiving core, and I'm very excited to watch them, especially with Aaron Rodgers at quarterback. But until then, they are a really good wide receiver core. I actually just noticed one wide receiver core I forgot to put in the elite that I did not put in there is the Seattle Seahawks. So I'm going to put them in now with DK Metcalf, Tyler Lockett, and then the addition of Jackson Smith and Jigba in the first round with the 20th overall pick. That should tell you everything you need to know. I think he's going to be a wide receiver 3. That's crazy. Jackson Smith and Jigba going to be a wide receiver 3. Some people had him going to a team where he was going to be the wide receiver 1, like, the Titans or the Texans or something. He is going to be the wide receiver 3 behind DK Metcalf and behind Tyler Lockett. I'm very excited. Tyler Lockett, a veteran receiver, DK Metcalf, he's going to be great. I think that receiver trio for the Seahawks is like one that could, you could even compare to like the Bengals. I think it is going to be a great wide receiver trio as long as they can all stay healthy, which there haven't been really any injury concerns over the last couple of years. I'm very excited to see the Seahawks, and I realize I forgot to put them in elite, but I think they are definitely going to be an elite trio, especially with Geno Smith, who had an outstanding year last year. I can't imagine what he's going to do now with Jackson Smith and Jigba as that wide receiver 3. So I'm very excited to watch that wide receiver trio. And yeah, Seahawks are definitely an elite receiving core. Moving back though to the really good category, the next really good receiving core I have is the Tampa Bay Buccaneers. Now, Mike Evans, Chris Godwin, and Russell Gage as the starting wide receiver trio. Mike Evans, I think, is one of the most underrated receivers of all time. He has had 1,000 yards in every single one of his seasons so far with pretty awful quarterback play other than Tom Brady for 3 years. Everyone knows he's great. Everyone knows he's really good, but he's never in like that really good receiver discussion. I think he should be. I think he's one of the most underrated receivers of all time. Chris Godwin, elite. Russell Gage, good wide receiver 3. They also added Trey Palmer in the draft. Only thing to me that's going to hold this wide receiver core back a little bit this year is their quarterback situation. It looks like it's going to be Baker Mayfield. Now, this video is mainly just on wide receiver cores. It's not going to be, how good I think they're going to do. But I do have to say they're kind of the first team on here that has not the best quarterback. All these other teams I put in elite have had good quarterbacks. The Bucs looking like it's going to be either Baker Mayfield or Kyle Trask. I think Baker Mayfield though. So, if Baker Mayfield can perform consistently well, I think it's going to be a very dominant receiving trio. But, that is going to be a question is how Baker Mayfield performs. I do think Mike Evans could start slowing down here a little bit. He is getting older. I think he's nearing 30 now. I can check real quick Mike Evans' age. And not that I think he's going to be bad. He's 29, so he's getting older. I think he's kind of at that peak level right now. I think in the next coming years we're going to see a steady decline. And don't think this is me saying Mike Evans is going to suck, but I do think he's getting that age where, like most receivers, you get to like your 30 years and then it's kind of just a slow, kind of steady decline. Chris Godwin, though, he's still in his prime. Like I said, Russell Gage, he is a good wide receiver 3, and then Trey Palmer, who they'll probably implement him as well. They also added Raheem Jarrett from Maryland in the draft as well. So it's a good receiver core, good depth at the receiving position. So I think it is a really good receiving core. And again, don't think I'm saying Mike Evans is going to be bad. I still think he's going to have a great couple of years. But I think he's at that age where he's like peaked and he's not going to get any better. That's kind of what I was saying. So I think it's a really good wide receiver core. I think you could make the case that it might be like an amazing team, amazing wide receiver core. But for now, the Buccaneers are a really good receiving core. Moving on to my final really good receiving core, I have the Buffalo Bills. Now, my main concern with the Bills is the slot receiver. Right now, it looks like it's going to be Deontay Hardy, who I'm not even sure who that is, I think. So I would have liked to see them get another slot receiver after losing Isaiah McKenzie, but Gabe Davis with Stephon Diggs, I still think it is a good wide receiver core. And then it looks like Dalton Kincaid, who they picked up in the first round of the draft, it looks like he's going to kind of fill in the role like the slot receiver, I guess, but as a tight end. So, I'm not super worried. I think it would have been nice to see them get another slot receiver in the draft or over free agency. It doesn't look like they're going to do that. Looks like they are very confident in Dawson Knox to fill that role. So, I guess You just got to trust them there. So they are a really good receiving core. Like I said, if they were able to add another slot receiver, I would have put them higher, but I am only going to put them at really good for now. They do have good wide receiver depth with sides, Gabe Davis and Stephon Diggs, Trent Sherfield from the Dolphins. They added Justin Shorter in the draft, and then Khalil Shakir as well. So, decent depth there at receiver, but I do think the lack of a true slot receiver is going to kind of hurt them. I actually have one more really good receiving core that I was going to put in there, and that is the Cleveland Browns. This is a receiving core that has actually been quietly bad for the last couple seasons. Nobody really talks about it with Amari Cooper there, but other than that, they didn't really have any other wide receiver, like 2 or 3. Now, with the addition of Elijah Moore, who they added in a trade with the Jets, I do think they are going to be a much improved receiving core. Donovan Peoples-Jones, he'll be a serviceable wide receiver 3. They also added Cedric Tillman in the draft from Tennessee, so I do think it definitely improved a lot this year. This offseason, Amari Cooper, Elijah Moore. Looks like it's going to be Amari Cooper, Elijah Moore, Cedric Tillman, Donovan Peoples-Jones. I think that's going to be a good receiving core. Good depth there as well. So the Cleveland Browns, they're at really good. And I do think, like I said, they've been quietly bad over the last couple years at the receiving core, but now I do think they are a really good receiving core. Moving on to good, I have the Bears. I think the Chicago Bears have definitely majorly improved with DJ Moore, but I think they are getting a little overhyped. DJ Moore, Chase Claypool, and Darnell Mooney. Darnell Mooney, I think, is pretty good, and I do think that as the wide receiver 2 now, I think he definitely can have a big improvement. Chase Claypool, he's, solid, I guess you could say. Tyler Scott, Dante Pedersen, and Equanimeous St. Brown is kind of like the depth pieces there. It's not a bad wide receiver core, but I do think it's getting a little overhyped. Don't get me wrong, I think DJ Moore was a major addition, but Chase Claypool and Darnell Mooney are not screaming out just great receivers that, you're necessarily going to be super afraid of. I do think DJ Moore, like I said, will be getting a load of targets every single game. So I think it's a good receiver core. I think they do have a pretty high ceiling now with DJ Moore, but until then, I'm just going to put them in good. Moving on to the next good team, we have the Carolina Panthers. I think they have definitely improved their wide receiver core a lot. Terrace Marshall, DJ Chark, Adam Thielen. They also have good depth there. Jonathan Mingo, they added in the second round of the draft. Laviscus Chenault and Shi Smith. It's a very good wide receiver depth. They have pretty good wide receiver depth, and I do think they're going to be able to rotate a lot of those guys around. The one thing, though, is it's not just a dominant receiving core. It's not like they have 1 or 2 guys that are super, dominant freak athlete receiver guys. But Adam Thielen, I do think he will be a good veteran receiver on that team in the slot. DJ Chark was a nice pickup over free agency. Jonathan Mingo, Laviscus Chenault. So they do have some young youth there, and I think over the years they will definitely develop to be a really good wide receiver core. For now, they're good, but I do think, like I said, as the season progresses and as they develop together, I do think it could improve to a really good receiving core. Moving on to the next good team, we have the New Orleans Saints. Now, if Michael Thomas can come back and stay healthy and perform how he was a couple years ago, I think it could be a really good or amazing team, amazing receiving core. But until then, I'm just putting them in good. Right now, Chris Olave, who hopefully is going to have an even bigger year too, with Derek Carr now a better quarterback there, I think he's going to have a big year too. Michael Thomas, like I said, if he can come back and play how he was in 2019, 2018, I think it's going to be a really good receiving core, but he's been injured every season, and, he's getting older as well. I think he's 30, 28, 29. He's getting up there. So I'm not very high on Michael Thomas coming back to play how he was a couple years ago. Rashid Shaheed, who is looking very good, looking promising now. I think he could be the wide receiver too if Michael Thomas doesn't come back and play great. A.T. Perry, who they also picked up in the draft. Or I think that might have been free agency, actually. But either way, A.T. Perry, great route runner. And I think he could definitely be a rotational piece in that wide receiver core as well. Traquan Smith. So they have good depth there. But I think the big question is Michael Thomas and how he comes back. And if he comes back how he was a few years ago, or if he's kind of faded, he's old, he's injury prone. We'll see. But I'm not very high on him coming back to play how he was a few years ago, but we'll have to wait and see. One other team I just saw that I forgot to put into a tier is the 49ers. I just realized I forgot to put them in really good. I think they are a really good receiving core. I don't think they're elite, but I do think with Brandon Ayuk, Deebo Samuel, and Juwan Jennings. So I think Juwan Jennings is a good serviceable wide receiver 3. I do think it is a good wide receiver core. Not too much depth there. Chris Conley and Ray McLeod as kind of your rotational guys wide receiver 4 and 5. But I do think with Deebo Samuel, Brandon Ayuk, and Juwan Jennings, who are all either really good or at least just a serviceable, solid wide receiver 3, I do think they are a really good receiving core. Moving on to the next good receiving core, I have the Washington Commanders. Now, this is a receiving core I think has one of the highest ceilings to improve this upcoming season. Right now, Terry McLaurin, Jahan Dodson, who I think is going to have a major year too with Sam Howell, and then Curtis Samuel at wide receiver 3. They also have pretty good depth there at Dyami Brown, Dax Milne, and Marcus Kemp. The main reason I'm very high on this Commanders receiving core and that they have a very high ceiling is Eric Bieniemy there as the offensive coordinator. I think if Sam Howell is the real deal and Eric Bieniemy can get that offense into shape and get that offense moving, I think that is going to have a very major big impact on that receiving core, and I do think they are going to have a very high ceiling. I think Jahan Johnson's a really good wide receiver too. Curtis Samuel, good veteran receiver as well, who was good. He didn't get used a lot last year in the receiving core. I think Eric Bieniemy is going to change that, so I think it's going to be a good receiving core. And like I said, if Sam Howell is the real deal, Eric Bieniemy can come in and fix that offense and get it rolling, I think it's going to be a really good wide receiver trio and wide receiver core in general, and I'm very excited to watch it. I hope it's good. I like Jahan Dotson, and I'm pretty high on that receiving core, but I just want to wait until, and I was thinking about having to prove it. I thought about having to put them there, but I do have confidence that there are going to be at least a good receiving core in 2023. Moving on to the next one, I have the Pittsburgh Steelers. I think with Kenny Pickett going into his year 2, I think he's going to have a big jump in his sophomore year. That offensive line is solid. I think it's going to help that receiving core a lot with Deontay Johnson, George Pickens, and Allen Robinson, who they add in a trade with the Rams. Allen Robinson, that is. I think George Pickens is going to have a big sophomore year with Kenny Pickett. Deontay Johnson, he's a solid wide receiver 1. Allen Robinson, I thought it was a good signing. I mean, they got him for a cheap deal, who's a good veteran receiver. So I thought that was good. I think it's a good receiving core. And yeah, I'm excited to see him. I think, like I said, I don't think it's going to be great, but I do think if Kenny Pickett can have at least a good jump in his sophomore year, I think that receiving core is definitely going to improve as well. And I do think even if he doesn't, I think it's at least a consistently good receiving core. And then moving on to my last good receiving core, I have the Detroit Lions. Now, the thing that really hurts them is the suspension of Jameson Williams. I think once Jameson Williams, because last year he was hurt, now he's suspended for 6 games. I think once he comes back and he's dominating like he showed flashes of last year after he came back from being hurt, I think it's going to be an elite, or not an elite, but I think it's going to be a really good receiving core. Right now, it's looking like it's going to be Josh Reynolds, Marvin Jones, and then Amon-Ra St. Brown, then also Khalif Raymond. It's a good receiving core, but I just think the suspension of Jameson Williams is definitely going to hurt that receiving core. Jameson Williams with that elite speed, great deep threat. Amon-Ra St. Brown's looking great. Josh Reynolds and Marvin Jones, though, consistent, I guess you could say. Nothing too special there, but I do think Amon-Ra St. Brown is enough to put them in good. Moving on to the have to prove it category, starting off, I have the Baltimore Ravens. I think this is an offense that is going to be very much improved from last year. Lamar Jackson has his contract, he has his money. You have some good receivers now, Odell Beckham Jr., Zay Flowers, and Rashad Bateman. Now, the only reason I'm saying they have to kind of prove how good they can be, Odell Beckham Jr. getting old, and, he was a free agent for a while. We haven't seen him play in a good bit. So that is going to be interesting to see how he comes in and plays. Zay Flowers, he's going to be great. I know he is, but, I want to wait to see it just before I put them too high. Rashad Bateman, I think now that the pressure's off of him a little bit as the wide receiver 1, he's going to be like the wide receiver 3 now. I do think he will actually improve now that some of the pressure's off of him. So I do think it's going to be a good receiving trio. I just think they have to prove it first and, kind of have to wait and show how good they can be. Moving on, though, to the next wide receiver core that I think is going to be very good, they just have to prove it, is the New York Giants. I think this is a team that is a much improved roster from last year, and I'll put them in have to prove it. Starting off, you got Isaiah Hodgins, who Isaiah Hodgins looking like he's going to be a very good receiver, showed a lot of flashes last year. Darius Slayton, and then Paris Campbell, who they picked up in free agency. They also have Jalen Hyatt, who they picked up in the round 3 of the draft. I thought the Giants had one of the best drafts in the league. I thought Jalen Hyatt was a great pick in round 3. Sterling Shepard, and then Wan'Dale Robinson. So it's a good wide receiver depth chart as well. They have good depth. Jalen Hyatt, Sterling Shepard, and Wan'Dale Robinson as like your wide receivers 3, 4, and 5, or 4, 5, and 6. So I'm guessing they're going to use them as rotational pieces. Isaiah Hodgins, Darius Slayton, and then Paris Campbell on the slot. Only reason I say they need to prove it is because they have the pieces. It's just, can they put them together now? And I have no doubt they will. I think Brian Daboll is going to get that offense moving. They just paid Daniel Jones. I think they trusted him to lead that receiving core, but I want to wait and just see it for my own eyes. But I do believe in that receiving core. And then the next receiving core I think has to prove it is the Denver Broncos. Now, this is a team that was obviously one of the most disappointing teams last year, but I do think with Sean Payton there, I do think the offense will definitely improve a little bit. I do have some concerns. There have been rumors that either Courtland Sutton and or Jerry Jeudy get traded. Tim Patrick is back from his injury. He was out most of the season last year with a foot injury. That is going to be a nice addition to have back. They also added Marvin Mims in the draft, Marcus Callaway, and then KJ Hamler as your kind of depth pieces. I think this is an offense that definitely has the tools to be good. Jerry Jeudy, Courtland Sutton, and Tim Patrick, but they just need to prove it. I think they will. I think they will prove that they're at least a consistently good receiving core, but they have to prove it because last year they did not prove that at all. Up next for my have to prove it team is the Houston Texans. I think this is an offense that could be very good this upcoming year if CJ Stroud can fill in the role of quarterback very quickly. That receiving core, though, is looking pretty good. They got a lot of players in the draft, Xavier Hutchinson and Tank Dell, who I think he and John Mechie could be like a small version of Tyreek Hill and Jalen Waddle just because of the sheer speed they both have. They also got Robert Woods this offseason, good veteran receiver there who's coming back to Houston. John Mechie, like I said, he's coming back. Thank God he was cleared and cleared to play again. He had cancer last year, and his rookie year he's cleared now. Thankfully, Nico Collins, who I think is going to step up and have another big year, or have a big year with a solid quarterback now. Xavier Hutchinson, like I said, and Tank Dell is kind of like your rotational guys, at least to get them kind of, like get them into the system. So it's going to be a good receiving core. I think they have to prove it, though, because they were pretty bad last year. You have a lot of new guys there, guys returning. John Mechie, Robert Woods, Tank Dell, and Xavier Hutchinson all are either returning, Robert Woods wasn't there last year. John Mechie was there but didn't play. Tank Dell and Xavier Hutchinson are both rookies, so it's going to be an interesting receiving core. I think they have a lot to prove. I think, it's going to be a lot of up and downs, but I do think they have a lot to prove, and I think they are going to be at least a consistently good receiving core. And then up next with have to prove it, I have the Patriots. I'm a big Patriots fan, you guys know it, and I do have concerns for this roster, but I do think they are going to be able to at least prove that they are a good receiving core. I think with the addition of Bill O'Brien at the offensive coordinator position, finally getting even just a decent offensive coordinator, not a defensive coordinator who has no idea what he's doing. I think finally getting a good offensive coordinator is going to at least help that receiving core to at least prove they are good. And I don't think it's a bad receiving core. Devontae Parker, Kendrick Bourne, Juju Smith-Schuster, who they added over free agency, and then Tyquan Thornton, Kayshon Boutte, and Demario Douglas. I think Tyquan Thornton could have a big year too if he is used right by Bill O'Brien. Kendrick Bourne, who I hope they use a lot more too. Kendrick Bourne wasn't used much at all last year. Hopefully they implement him. He's a very good receiver, and I hope they get him to. I hope they get the ball to him a lot. Juju Smith-Schuster, good slot receiver there. And then Kayshon Boutte, who they added in the 6th round, I think that's going to be a nice addition as well. So hopefully, I think this receiving core, it's not very scary. Obviously, they don't have a lot of just pure, great, dominant receivers, but I do think it's enough to at least be able to prove that they are a good receiving core. So I'm putting in have to prove it. I think if Mac Jones can have a good year, I think it's going to be a good receiving core. But I do think they have a lot to prove after last year. Another have to prove it team that I think has potential to be a good receiving core, but they have to prove it, is the Indianapolis Colts. I think they had a very good draft, and one of those good draft picks was adding Joshua Downs in their receiving roster. They added him in the 2nd round, I believe. It might have been 2nd or 3rd round. He did fall pretty far, but I do think he is going to be good. The only problem is he is going to be probably limited to be a pure slot receiver just because of his size. They also added Isaiah McKenzie in the slot, who I thought was a nice pickup as well. Alec Pierce hoping to have a big year too. Michael Pittman Jr., solid. So I do think it is a good receiving core. They just have a lot to prove. Isaiah McKenzie and Josh Downs could both be very nice additions, and if they can both play consistently, I think it is going to be a very good receiving core, and I think they just have to prove it with Anthony Richardson or whoever their quarterback is. But I'm very excited to see this Colts receiving core in 2023. Moving down to the I have concerns category, and this category is basically just saying I have, it's what it is. I have concerns. I don't think it's going to be a bad receiving core necessarily, but I'm just not very high on it right now. Starting off, I have the Kansas City Chiefs. Now, last year they lost Juju Smith-Schuster, they lost Tyreek Hill, and they won the Super Bowl. So clearly, their receiving core doesn't matter a whole lot, but I do think at some point you have to be realistic. At least last year they had Juju Smith-Schuster, who is a good, versatile, serviceable wide receiver. This year, they really don't have that to me. And unless a guy like Kadarius Toney or Sky Moore can step up, Sky Moore coming into his sophomore season, and they can have a big year, I just don't see this receiving core being that good at all. Sky Moore, Kadarius Toney, Marquez Valdes-Scantling, and then Rashee Rice, who they picked in the draft. I wasn't a big fan of the Rashee Rice pick. It felt like a bit of a reach to me. And I'm just not high on this receiving core. Marquez Valdes-Scantling didn't even have a single catch in the Super Bowl this past year. Kadarius Toney, probably going to be the wide receiver one. I do think with Patrick Mahomes, he'll definitely have, probably his best season yet. Sky Moore hopefully has a big wide receiver, or big year too, as the wide receiver too, but I'm just not very high on this receiving core right now. And again, I know it's Patrick Mahomes and he can do just about anything with a little bit, but as I said, I do think you have to be realistic, at least in the sense that the receiving core is not very good right now. But we'll see. And I'm not counting the Chiefs out because I counted them out last year, and that was a big mistake. Moving on, though, to the next I have concerns roster for the receiving core. I have the Rams. Now, I know Cooper Kupp is coming back. I think he's going to be great. I don't think he's going to be held back anymore because of his injury. I think he's going to be great. But other than that, Van Jefferson is a good wide receiver too. But to me, there's just not much else there. Ben Skowronek, he's okay. He filled in the wide receiver 1, kind of wide receiver 2 role while Cooper Kupp was hurt last year. Tutu Atwell. They added Puka Nacua out of BYU. I don't know how to say his name this offseason. But to me, it's just not a very good receiving core besides Cooper Kupp. Van Jefferson's good. He's solid. But other than those two, it's just not anything super special. And I'm just not very high on it right now. And I think Cooper Kupp's going to come back great from his injury. Don't get me wrong. But to me, it's just not something that it's just not a receiving core I'm very high on. And then moving on to the final, I have concerns receiving core, the Green Bay Packers. Now, I think the Packers in a few years are going to be a very good receiving core. But right now, my major concern with that receiving core is the age on that receiving core. I don't think there is I think they're all younger than 24. Christian Watson and Romeo Doubs, the two quote unquote veterans on that team, on that receiving core, both are coming into their sophomore seasons. Jaden Reed and Dontavian Wicks, who they added in the draft, are both rookies. And then tight ends, I know I'm not counting tight ends for the receiving cores, but Luke Musgrave and Tucker Kraft, both going to be rookies as well. So that wide receiver room, it's just a very young wide receiver room. And, like I said, even with the tight ends, it's just a young receiver room. And I think that, Christian Watson, Romeo Doubs both showed flashes last year. I think they're both going to be good wide receivers this year. But just it being such a young receiving core, and when you have a young receiver like in his second or third year, kind of being the quote-unquote veteran to the rookies, it's just a big role to fill. And I'm not saying Christian Watson and Romeo Doubs can't fill that role, but it's just a tough role to fill as the experienced player on the team when you're only 24, 25 going into your sophomore year. So that's my main concern. I do think within the next couple of years it will be a good receiving core, but until then and until they can kind of mesh together and develop together, I have some concerns. Moving on to the bottom three wide receiver teams in the league, I have the Titans as the worst receiving core in the league. I think with Treylon Burks as your wide receiver 1, who I'm high on him, some people, I think he's all right, but when he's your pure wide receiver 1, I don't think he's that good. Nick Westbrook, Akide, and Kyle Phillips, it's just not a good receiving room. That's just the only way to say it. It's not a good receiving room. Nick Westbrook, Kine, he's all right. Like I said, he kind of showed flashes last year, but when he's your wide receiver 2, it's just not going to go well. And I do worry for either Ryan Tannehill or Will Levis or whoever their starting quarterback is, because really it is not a good receiving core at all. And I am pretty worried about that receiving core. Moving on, though, next one, I have the Cardinals. Now, right now, it's pretty good with DeAndre Hopkins there, but it is looking more and more likely like he is not going to be a Cardinal this upcoming season. I think with Marquise Brown there, I think Marquise Brown could be a great fantasy option if he's the wide receiver 1 there. I think he could have a big year. Other than that, though, other than Marquise Brown filling in that wide receiver 1 role, there's just not much there. Rondale Moore, Michael Wilson, who they got in the draft. I think Michael Wilson is a good athlete. I think if he can develop, he could be a really good receiver there. Zach Pascal, Greg Dortch. It's just not a good receiving core. It's one of those that just kind of lacks that talent. I think Marquise Brown is good. I think he'll be great, but other than him, there's just no one else really there to serve as like a good wide receiver 2 or 3. Granted, DeAndre Hopkins is no longer there. And then moving on to the last worst receiving core in the league, I have the Atlanta Falcons. Now, Drake London, hopefully he can have a big year too. Other than him, though, they added Matt Collins as their wide receiver 2 this offseason. I think it could actually be a decent wide receiver core, Matt Collins, and then Scotty Miller as the slot receiver. It's not bad necessarily, but it's just really nothing special. I think Drake London, hopefully he can have a big sophomore year. Matt Collins, who was decent last year as he had to replace Hunter Renfrow on the Raiders, and Scotty Miller from Tampa Bay. It's just an okay receiving core. It's not... you could put it even, maybe I have concerns. I'm going to leave it in good luck to your quarterbacks, but it's just not a very strong receiving core. Hopefully Kyle Pitts gets used a lot as that tight end there. But yeah, it's just not a great receiving core there for Atlanta. Yeah, guys, that is going to do it for today's video. I hope you guys did enjoy. Let me know down in the comments what you guys agreed with, what you guys disagreed with, what you guys would change, and what you guys would keep the same. I hope you guys did enjoy. If you guys did, make sure to like and subscribe, because I'm going to be getting a lot more content out like this. A lot of tier ranking videos. I think they're a good way to get videos out right now when there's not a lot of content to do. I'm probably going to do more content on like the off-season mini camps that are starting right around now. But I'm definitely going to be doing a lot more tier ranking videos like these in the future. So comment down below if you guys have any video ideas. I would love to do them. If you guys want me to do any like team reviews, I would love to do team reviews as well. If you have a favorite team you want me to team review, let me know. Any video ideas, let me know. I would be more than happy to do them. I hope you guys enjoyed. Thank you guys so much for watching. It's been your boy, Jay Lay, and I'll see y'all in the next one. Peace out, everybody.